Begin the current Daf Mesech Beitzah Daf Ches. Begin 3 lines down the top of the Yomid. The Gemara continues explaining the final statement of our mission, which opened up this parak, this Masechta, regarding the halacha of someone went and he shechted an animal on Yom Tov. Although there's machlekes b'sham b'sil, if one is allowed to go ahead and stick the shovel into the ground to go ahead and take the earth to cover the blood. However, everyone agrees that if it really was shechted, that yachba b'deka b'yichassid. And then the last line was she'efa kir muchanu, and the Gemara is going to discuss that line. Seemingly seems unrelated to what the statement was basically said. And this corresponds to Kazik and Cheskar to ending Navachem. Krishna, we're joining us for today's daf. Some of the things discussed in today's daf are the topic of kisa hadam on Yom Tov, regarding covering the blood of an animal that was shechted on Yom Tov. Mekalkel is generally on malacha is only liable if you do a constructive act. That's what the lamatis malacha is about. But mekalkel, if it's a destructive act, then one is exempt. Chaylev, the forbidden fats of an animal, which is the equivalent by a chaya, by a wild animal, are actually not problematic. Chala is similar to the equivalent of what truma is to produce, is what when someone has a dough, you have to separate a portion and give it to the kohen. Malacha shen zirch legufa is when you do a forbidden activity that's not the way it was made and done in the Mishkan, or not for its intended purpose, that is not going to be asur. Koi is a creature that's sabik chai, sabik behema. It's not clear if it was a wild animal or a behema, hence it has possibly the stringencies of both. Asa say what Dachaloisa says is the concept that when you have a positive commandment, it overrides a negative prohibition. So begin the current Daf Ches. 3 lines down at the top of the Yomim. The Mishnah had said again that although it's machlekes b'sham b'sil, if you should go ahead and shecht an animal if you don't have prepared earth, but if you did slaughter, then everyone agrees you could go ahead and dig in the ground and cover the blood. And then the next words of the Mishnah are she'efa kira, because the ashes of an oven are considered prepared. So the Gemara says, Eifa kira, the ashes of a stove, mandikar shmei. Who mentioned that you're telling me, that, the word shin, the letter shin is telling me, because the ashes of a kira are prepared. Which sounds like as if you're coming to explain something that was mentioned before. How does ashes being prepared in the oven have anything to do with the fact that if you don't have the earth prepared to cover the blood, and really they still hold you shouldn't do it, but if you did shecht and slaughter after the fact, go ahead and dig, everyone's going to agree. How does that continue? Because the ashes of an oven are prepared. So Amar Rabbi says you're right. Hafekama. It really should be not a shin, but it should really be a vav. Ve'efekira, and the ashes of the stove are considered prepared, meaning there's no problem about muktzah to cover the blood of the animal. So you're right, it's talking about something else. It's not coming to tell us regarding digging of earth. That was one thing that was being discussed in the Mishnah, which and with the Yabit, everything agrees you could. And then we're saying, you want to cover the blood? I'll tell you something else. Is the ashes of an oven is considered, to discuss it, what context is it talking about, but upon them, the ashes of a stove are considered prepared. It's not considered as muktzah. However, on that, the Gemara qualifies. Amar Rav Yehuda Merab, he says that this teaching was only only if it wasn't heated up from before Yom Tov. And so therefore, only if it was heated up from before Yom Tov, so then yesterday already you were thinking about it, what you're going to use with these ashes. You already had the ashes from before Yom Tov. And you know you could use it for whatever purposes you want to use it for. Let's say it got heated up on Yom Tov, we can't say you were thinking what to do with these ashes, which like Tais explains in the context of Noilid, it wasn't around from before Yom Tov, so it was muktzah, so then us it's going to be forbidden because you didn't have these ashes. It's not like you thought that you're going to use the ashes for whatever you want to use it for, because it wasn't around. Now, but one more qualification, but let's say you're right, it wasn't heated up from before Yom Tov, but it's still hot. Whatever it is, obviously you just burnt it today. You made it to ashes today, and it still has hot like coals. Then mutter. Then actually it would be permitted to use it for whatever you wanted, because yesterday when it was wood, so it was prepared for what? Well, not for ashes, because ashes wasn't around. So you're saying for ashes, you're saying really it's muktzah, but it was fit to use the wood to heat it up and to cook and to roast on it. That you were thinking you would use the wood for that. Oh, that still has that utility because it's still hot. Oh, and since it's fit to go ahead and use it to, let's say, roast an egg, so you could also take it and use it to cover the blood. It still has the non-muktzah status because you can still use it for what it would have been mukhin for, which was for cooking. So that's what we said. We said initially that we said it's only if it was heat up, it was prepared from before Yom Tov. So it was already prepared. And I have in mind I'm going to use it whatever I needed to. But let's say it was heat up on Yom Tov. We said it's going to be asa, that's going to be a problem of Naila. But then if, let's say even if it was heat up today and turned into ashes today, but it's still hot, then I can still use it what I did have in mind before Yom Tov, which was cooking when I was thinking about the wood. Also, it's still I can use it for whatever I want to, and if I could even use it for covering the blood. What? No, it could be even with afer, right? That's taste discuss offer and afer, but you could cover it with even thin things, noidishal pishton, whatever. You could cover it with all different types of finely ground things. What?
Sawdust.
Yeah, right. Noidishal, right? Exactly. All those types of. So that's what we're saying, that the ashes can be used for that utility too. And there was a discussion if it has to be prepared for before Yom Tov or even on Yom Tov if it's still hot. Tanalachi, as similarly in the Beitzah, when they said that the ashes of the stove is considered prepared, it's explaining what we just said. That we only said this when it was heated up from before Yom Tov, so then it was prepared, it was not muktzah. Let's say it only got heated up on Yom Tov, meaning that you can't use wood to cover the ashes. It only became heat up on Yom Tov and then became ashes, and then also it's going to be forbidden because, again, that's Noiland. You didn't have this entity from before Yom Tov. But, it says these three steps in the Beitzah too, but if it's still hot, that you could take these ashes and cook an egg, so it still has utility, it's still non-muktzah, then you could use it for another utility, which is to cover the blood. Another halacha, the Beitzah continues, is hichnes offer. Let's say someone brings in a lot of dirt into one place for the purposes of liginasai, for his garden, or l'chorvasai, for his ruin, because he wants to spread it out. So that's why he has this dirt all gathered together. You can take that dirt, as long as it's piled up in a pile, you're thinking you're going to use it for whatever you need it for. So it's not considered muktzah, and you could use it to go ahead and cover the blood. And that's the chiddush, like Tess discusses, that it's not going to be bottled to the ground. Since you pile it up in one place, you say, hey, whatever you need dirt for, you'll use it for. So even though it's liginasai l'chubasai, but since you had in mind to use it for other things, so you'll have in mind for all types of things, which is also for covering the blood. A related discussion from Rabbi Huda, he says, Machnes Adam Malay Kupase offer, and this is what takes the chiddush is that what's he adding on more than what the Beitzah just said. He's saying even though it's not a huge pile, even though it's just a box full of dirt, unspecified, but he puts it in one place. The halach is and he could go ahead and use it for whatever it is that he needs to, and we don't say that it's nullified to the ground of the house because it's very little. So no. And also you have in mind that you want to have this little pile, use it whatever you need to, and you could use it for covering the blood. Now, however, he says, it's only if you designated a corner where to put this dirt, and you didn't just scatter it throughout the house. So it's obvious that the reason why you're putting it into the corner is for whatever needs you need it for. And as Rashi points out, that we must be talking about very soft earth, which is not lacking, no digging, no crushing. The only thing where it would be lacking for, let's say, to cover the blood is just if it's prepared or not. And it's considered prepared because you put it into the corner and you're showing that you're designating it, you want to have, in case you need dirt for something, you'll use it, therefore, that you could use this on Yom Tov. However, the Gemara asks, Meisvei. The Gemara asks from the following Mishnah, Masechta Chulun, on this opinion of Rabbi Huda. Mishnah says, Kai. Kai was a creature that was not clear if it was a wild animal, what's called a chai, or a behemoth, a domesticated animal. So the halacha has like this: Ein shech l'neisa b'Yom Tov. You cannot shech such an animal on Yom Tov. Although it's a kosher animal, you can't shech the Yom Tov because maybe it's a chaya, and a behemoth doesn't need kisa adam. Only a bird and a chaya needs to cover the blood. So maybe it's a chaya and you have to cover the blood. Now the problem is you cannot cover the blood of this kohen Yom Tov, as we can shortly explain. So you can't shech on Yom Tov. It might need kisui, you're not going to be able to do kisui. So you're not allowed to shech this Koy on Yom Tov. Now, what happens if a guy did slaughter the Koy on Yom Tov? Then, then you don't cover the blood. Why? Because maybe it's a behemoth. And there's no mitzvah adam on the behemoth, so you're not allowed to move the earth for the purposes of a non-Yom Tov purpose. That's what the Mishnah says. Says the Gemara, now if it's correct, Rabbi Yehuda had just taught, that you could have earth that's prepared for whatever utilities a person needs. So then, I don't understand. Even if this koy is a behema, l'chasye, you should still be able to cover the blood. Kedei Rabbi Yehuda, where if you went and you gathered a box full of earth, what's the problem? It's not muktzah. So what am I doing wrong, even if it's a behema? So says the Gemara, I don't understand. According to your reasoning that you're saying, oh, it's a difficulty on Rabbi Yehuda, that according to him, there's a way of having prepared earth, and why can't you move it? L'chasi, what do you mean? I can tell you according to everyone why it would be difficult. Why is there a question on Rabbi Yehuda? L'chasi be'efakira, what do you mean covered with the, you told me as we opened up the ashes of the oven, or you have, if the shovel's already stuck in from before Yom Tov, that our Mishnah explicitly said that's considered prepared. Why are you asking this on Rabbi Yehuda? Why is it difficult on Rabbi Yehuda? It's a difficulty on everyone. Says the Gemara, what are you going to say? The Leslie. You can obviously tell me that. No, it's talking about where he doesn't have ashes, he doesn't have the shovel stuck in. So how can I tell Leslie? So why is it difficult on Rabbi Yehuda? I'll tell you also, it's talking about where he doesn't have a box full of earth that's put on the side. Well, why are you asking on Rabbi Yehuda when according to everyone there could be options of prepared earth? It's not difficult on Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, yeah, but ihachi, if that's the case, that you're telling me that you have no earth prepared, so my area is suffix. Then what are you telling me? Oh, you're not allowed to shech a koi because it's a suffix, chay be'ema, what do you mean? Who do we paskin like? We paskin like Basil. Basil says that, yeah, if you don't have any shovel stuck in, you don't have any ashes of an oven, you're not allowed to shech even a full-fledged behem chaya on Yom Tov, and even he says even the it's going to be usher if the shovel is not stuck into the ground. So why picking then a koi? If you tell me there's no options of covering with blood, so why picking a koi? Even though vadechai wouldn't be able to. Says Gemara, you're right. Now of course we're going like Basil, and you're right. It would be by chai, but we're saying loy mebayu kama. This that we picked koi that you can't shecht it on Yom Tov. For sure, a regular chaya that definitively needs kisadam, and you cannot because you told me he doesn't have a box of earth, he doesn't have ashes from the stove, he doesn't have a shovel stuck in, is telling me a chiddush in kai, and for sure I would know vadai, regular chaya. Why? As the Gemara explains, loy mebaya vadai. I don't have to tell you that a definitive chaya, the loy lishchat, you're not slaughter on Yom Tov, because we're holding Basil, which holds that you're not allowed to go ahead and dig on Yom Tov, and if it's not, there's no shovel in from before Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do it. And we know that you have to do kisadam. So for sure, if you're not going to be able to do it, we don't let you shech. Of a suffix, but regarding a kai, which you're not even sure if it's a chai. Ema mishum simchas Yom Tov, so I would say, okay, Maisa, simchas Yom Tov, fleish, or whatever, but they see that lishchit, v'lo l'chaseh, because anyways you're not sure if it needs kisadam. So I would think maybe there we would let you because the simchas Yom Tov to go ahead and shecht it and not to cover the blood, because anyways maybe you don't have to. That's the chiddush in that halacha of the Mishnah Masechta Schulin, that even a kai, which is a suffix, that even over there, but you're right, it's not a difficulty. We're going like Basil, who says that of course it was a chai, we wouldn't go ahead and let you shecht it and not to. We're saying even a kai that maybe it doesn't need kisadam, so maybe we should let you shecht it and don't do the mitzvah kisadam. That's the chiddush. I would say no, lamaisa, it might need kisadam, and therefore you're not going to shecht the kai on Yom Tov. However, that's not, the Gemara is not finished with this discussion. The Gemara says, how could you say this? Because as a continue to Beitzah Daf, Tani Seifa. The Mishnah continued over there and says, Vim Shachtari. Okay, we're telling you not to shecht the kai on Yom Tov. If you did shecht it, then you don't cover the blood, right? Because like we said, it might be a behemoth, and behemoth you don't cover the blood. But one thing is, the inference is, which says take out the word Dereisha, that b'de'isle askina. Obviously, you're talking about where you have what to cover the blood with, because you're telling me that, oh, don't cover the blood. Meaning, as Rashi explained, I understand when you said the first halacha in the Mishnah, when you said don't slaughter the kai. So that's necessary, like you said. That don't tell me that you should slaughter it because of covered yom tiv without covering it, because anyways it's a suffix. Okay, I understand. You tell me that's a chiddush that no, don't shech the kai. But the sefer that says that ein machasin, if you did shech it, don't cover it. I understand. If you don't have one of the other options we said, that there's what to cover it with that's already prepared, what do you have to tell me that, oh, by the kai, like you tell me a chiddush azal, like, okay, and if you did shech, then don't cover it. What do you mean? If a vadai chaya, which we know has a mitzvah of kisei adam, we said already from Bitzah that you're not going to cover the blood. So a suffix that you don't even know if it has a mitzvah of kisei adam, I have to tell you if you shech don't cover it. That wouldn't make sense. Oh, no, the Mishnah wouldn't tell me such a thing. If a vadai chaya you're not going to cover for sure, I don't have to tell you a suffix, but you don't have to. Rather, Rashi explains the inferences must be talking about that you have what to cover it with. You have a fakiru, you have a box of earth, you have option, you have the shovel already stuck in. Which by a vadei chaya, we said in the Mishnah, Beis Hillel agrees you would cover the blood, and that's what the Mishnah Chul must be telling us. Yes, but by a suffix, by kai, which it might be behemoth, that it might not need kisei adam, so then you're not going to cover the blood. But that's the difficulty. Why are we not going to cover the blood? If you hold the Rabbi Yehuda, then, or if you have the ashes of a stove, well, why wouldn't you cover it? You already have prepared. What's the problem about covering the blood? So Elam Rabba, the Rabba says, he says, Efa Kira, he says a svar. He says, you're right. Obviously, we have to be talking about that you have the ashes of the oven, or like Rabbi Yehuda, you have the box of earth. In which that got us into this whole discussion. We're asking a question of Rabbi Yehuda, says, what do you mean? If you have a box of earth, why wouldn't you do kisei adam with a kai? So it says, obviously you have, and then what's difficult on everyone then? You have the ifakira, you have the ashes of the stove. Everyone agrees that's also not a problem about moktzah. So why wouldn't you be able to do that? So the Gemara is giving an answer why you're right, which has to answer to everybody. Ifakira, the ashes of the stove, is muchan levada. It's prepared for a definitive utility, which is, like let's say a chaya, which you know you're going to have to use it for. But the ein muchin l'safek, but it's not prepared for that of a suffix, for that which is a doubt, where you're not sure if you're going to need it. Meaning, the Gemara assumes right now what it's saying is that even though his intention is for everything, but when you put it in, you have a mind only for that which it's for sure going to be necessary, and not for that which is it's not effective for that which is a suffix. That's what the Gemara says. I don't understand, but since he's thinking about it, so there's no problem about muktzah. So l'safik my time alloy. Why wouldn't it be able to be brought in for that of a suffix? Because what's the problem? Of a guma, or because he's making a pit when he's taking some of the earth from the pile? But vade not covered guma. But what do you mean? But even when you have a chaya, which we call it vade, meaning for sure you have to do kisei adam, you're also making a pit. And rather that obviously by the vade, why time is it permitted? Because kedira baba, that he said, we quoted previously that he says that it's considered makalkal, it's destructive act, and therefore you can be potter, because makalkal is not something that you chayiv for as a malacha. So so then what's the difference between suffix and vadai? It's considered an act of makalkal. So Ella rather says the Gemara, suffix my timeless. So what are you going to tell me why by this kai, which is a suffix, why can't you do the kisei adam with this pile of the ashes is dilma of the kasisha? Because you might do crushing, which there might be clumps, and you have to crush it, which is going to be a problem about Taishim. So then I understand. Again, the Gemara is going back and forth. Then also that by a chaya, which also is a vada that needs to have kisei adam, should also be concerned for the crushing. That's also going to be a malacha. So what the Gemara answers right now is that since most times you don't have to crush it, so the Rabbanim are not going to be geyser because of crushing. Because even if it's going to come to that, it's not going to be an issa d'oraisa. Why not? Because vadai, when it's a definitive, what we call a chaya, ki ka'avid kasisha, when you do crushing, asi aseh, the positive commandment of v'chisahu ba'afer, which is the mitzvah aseh of covering the blood, comes along v'dachi es leis aseh, and it overrides the negative prohibition of leisasa malacha, not to do malacha. which the Gemara tells in Yevamos Daf Daled Aleph, asay is doichel leis asay. So therefore, even if it would be a leis asay of kasisha, it's okay because the mitzvah asay kisadam, which you have by a vadai, would be daichid. Whereas by that of the kai, we don't know if it has a mitzvah asay because it's a suffix. So there, we wouldn't be able to do it. But by vadai, we would be able to do it. That's the chiddush in this halach of the Mishnah Masechta School that we're saying that if you did shecht, you don't cover the blood, even though you have options. Yeah, but because you might have to crush it down to make it fine, to be able to do kisadam, that would only be permitted by a vadai, meaning by a chaya, which you could have asay d'chalesasay. By a suffix, we don't know if there's a mitzvah asay. So and you might run into a problem, you might be crushing, and you'll be over lesasay, lesasay kamalacha. So we're not going to let you do by a suffix because you might be over this deraisa of lesasay kamalacha, and you don't have that asay d'chalesasay. However, the Gemara asks a question that says, wait a second. When did we say that a positive command comes along and overrides a negative prohibition? The Gemara tells us an important klal in general regarding the concept of asay d'chaleisasay. He's kibin mila b'tzaras. For example, if let's say someone has, it says in the Torah, hishama b'nega tzaras. Yes, you're supposed to be careful regarding the nega tzaras, which Beitzah teaches that it's coming to say that it's forbidden to cut off the baheres, the nega of tzaras. Now, what happens if a person has on the foreskin, on the arla, he has tzaras? So you can be, if you do mila, you can be over of hishama ben nega tzaras. You can be taking off the nega, which you're not allowed to. So the halacha is that you're allowed to go ahead and do the mila in the arla, even where the baheres is, you could cut it off. Why? Because the mitzvah say of mila is doicha de say of hishama ben nega tzaras. Now, or inami sadma tzitzis. Let's say, for example, you have tzitzis, which is klein, because you have the wool and you have the tchelis, which are wool, and you have the linen. So the pasuk says, however, in the Varm Chabbeis, leisil b'shat, it says don't wear klein, but it says gedim taslach that you should make tzitzis, which tells us that you're allowed to go ahead and wear tzitzis that has klein. Now, what's the common denominator of these two things, the mila b'tzaras and sadma tzitzis? The be'idna de kama akalav. The moment you're uprooting the negative prohibition, meaning when you're circumcising and you're pulling off the foreskin of the tzaras, or when you're putting on the talis and you're wearing shatnez, that same moment, kamukam la'aseh, you're fulfilling the positive commandment of wearing tzitzis or doing the bris milah. That's when you'll say, aseh d'chaleisaseh. The problem is, over here, this positive commandment, when you're going to be crushing the earth, when you're uprooting negative prohibition, like mokam la'aseh, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah to say then until you actually go and take the earth and you cover it. So that's not going to be qualified for asay d'chaleisaseh. So it's not even a good answer that you're saying. You were saying that our chiddush is by kai, which is suffix. That then, we're not going to let you take from this a bunch of earth. Why not? Because you might come to crush it. So he says again, what's with vadai? No, vadai, even if it happens, I'll say asay d'chaleisaseh. You don't say asay d'chaleisaseh because it's a suffix. Maybe you don't have that asay. It's not true. Vadai, you don't have asay d'chaleisaseh. Because vadai is only when be'idna. It's called when at the moment, the same moment that you're doing the asay is when you're oiked the leisaseh. Here you're going to first be oiked the leisaseh, crushing the earth, and then you're only going to be mekabel asay later. No one says asay d'chaleisaseh then. So says the Gemara, no, I like kasha. It's not difficult. The bahadi the kotzach kamachasi. We're talking about a case where as you're crushing it, you're covering it, meaning you'll put the earth, the clumps, on top of the blood of the animal, and you'll crush it. And then the moment that it's being crushed is the moment that it's being refined, and then it's covering it. So that would be be'idna. But the Gemara still doesn't like it. The Gemara says, but saif, at the end of the day, it's still Yom Tov as I say. The Yom Tov is a positive commandment, where it says in the pasuk in the Yikach of Gimel, B'yomer Rishon Shabbosin, which sounds like shros, like you should stop. It's a positive commandment of not doing malacha. And Malaisa it's also a negative prohibition, where it says, malacha. A positive commandment cannot override a positive and negative commandment. So again, it doesn't really work. Your whole answer, why we're saying by koy and not by vadai, is because you'll have a siddur chaleisa say by a vadai, by a chaya, to do cover the blood, is be machas the dam to override the loisei of loisei of Not true. Because then it has a loisei ba'aseh, and a positive commandment of kisadam wouldn't override it. So back to the question, what's the difference? Why are you telling me this halacha that if you shachted, that then you cannot cover the blood by a koy, which is a suffix, but vadi also you shouldn't be able to cover the blood because of this problem about crushing it. So Rabbi says that the reason why we said that specifically by a koi, which is a suffix, that you're not cover the blood, is very similar to what we said before, but the Gemara just says it a little bit clearer and says it's about your intention. Efekira, the ashes of the oven, daite levave. Your thoughts are for a definitive usage. Vein daite, this is what's switching. The Gemara said this before, but as Rashi explained, the Gemara thought that it just doesn't work, as if there's some halachic problem. That's what we said. Why? What's the difference between vade and suffix? So the Gemara is saying it differently now and saying no, it's not regarding halachic, it's regarding your intention. Vein daite suffix. You don't have a mind for doubtful situations. You're not a speculator. You know something you're going to use it for. So therefore, by a suffix, it would have a problem about muktzah. And the same thing would be for Rabbi Yehuda. When you bring earth and you put it into your house, although you're preparing it and it's not considered muktzah, it's only for a definitive utility like a chaya. But a kai, which is a suffix, any suffix you don't have in mind. The Rabbi says that the reason why we're saying that this isser, that if you shecht, you cannot cover the blood on Yom Tov, specifically by a kai, which is a suffix, which we're asking, he's saying, whatever is by a vade should be by a suffix too. So, especially so you don't have this svar, but say there should be the same thing. So Rava says what was mentioned before earlier in the Gemara, that actually some say that when it said Elam Rabba on the third line from the top of the Yomim is actually Rava. But the Gemara is explaining it now, not like we thought before that it was a halachic problem, because we're saying halachically they should be the same. Rather, it's a difference in intention. And that difference of intention will affect its muktzah status. Efek here, the ashes of a stove, daite lavada. Your intention, when you're thinking about it, is for something definitive, something definite. We're talking about here regarding the person's thought process. You're not speculating. You're not just having in mind for something that may be going to come up. That's not what you prepared it for. So therefore, it's by the case of a kai, which is a suffix, you're going to run into a problem about muktzah. So therefore, that's why it's not a difficulty. We had originally asked on Rabbi Yehuda, what do you mean? You said that if you have a box of earth prepared there or whatever in the corner of the house, not going to be bottled to the earth, and you could use it, so why wouldn't you be able to cover it? It's simply because it's not prepared. It's a problem about muktzah, even though you prepared it, but not for a suffix purpose, only for a definite purpose. As the Gemara shows, Rava goes according to his reasoning that he says that if someone's having something in mind for vadai, he's not thinking about and preparing it for a situation of a doubt that might come up. As we see Damar Rava said the following halacha. It says, Hichnas Afra, Lachasas Beitzah. Let's say someone gathered earth to use it to cover excrement on Yom Tov. If a person has a little child and is afraid that the child is going to relieve himself on the floor on Yom Tov, so he has earth prepared to cover the earth. Where the halacha is that you're not going to make brachas and it's going to be smelly or whatever. So he has earth prepared. So the halacha is mutar l'chasas b'dam tzipor. So then you're allowed to use that same earth to cover the blood of a bird, which you're going to shecht on Yom Tov, because since you're preparing the earth for a situation of suffering, you don't know if a child's going to run around without his diaper and is going to relieve himself on the floor. You don't know, and still you're preparing the earth for that. So for sure, regarding the situation of vade, which you know that you're going to want to shecht the bird on Yom Tov, and you're going to have to cover the blood. For sure, it's prepared for that. But this is the halacha. But dam tzipor. Let's say you prepared the earth for the blood of a bird. Then and you're not allowed to use it to cover the excrement of a child. If he has a little child that relieves himself in Yom Tov, you cannot use that earth for covering it. Why? Because the blood of a bird, there you definitively need it. If you're going to shecht it, you know you're going to have to cover the blood. But the child relieving himself on the floor doesn't usually happen. It might happen, and if it happens in a place where it's disgusting, he's going to want to cover it. But that's a suffix if that's going to happen. When he prepared the earth, was for a vadai, not for a suffix. That's Rabbi Shloimy said that he said that here the reason why the Mishnah says in Masechet Chulin that in shachat you cannot cover it. Why can't you cover it? By a chaya you could cover it. You tell me you have it prepared. Yeah, there it's prepared for a vada, but it's not prepared. It's going to be considered as muktzah for that of a suffix. That's one interpretation. Now, Naharbloi Omri, the Naharbloins, they say, who that refers to the Gemara Sanhedrin says refers to Rami Bar Beribi. They say, no, even if you gathered the earth to cover the blood of a bird, that's why you had prepared it from before Yom Tov, you would be able to go ahead and use it to cover if the child relieves himself on the floor. Because as Rashi explains, since you prepared it because as Rashi says the word Danami Karv Levada. You have to know what that means, but it's also close to definitive. So you're preparing it anyway, it's very likely a child's going to go ahead and run around without anything on, he's going to relieve himself, and therefore it's also included in that preparation. Now, continue on this theme. Amr bin Marav, they said in the West that pligi bar Bitzah bar Chama Reb Zera, or Ramla, some says actually it was Machligis Rava Bered Reb Bitzah bar Chama and Reb Zera. That Kachad Amma, one says Kai Harehu Kutsaya. This Kai, this animal, we're not sure if it's a Chai Behema, is similar to excrement. What does that mean? Doesn't mean the animal's like excrement. It means in this halachic context that if someone prepares earth to cover Tsaya, so then you're allowed to go ahead and cover the blood of the Kai because both are soft. Just like we said that if the child's going to relieve himself, you're not sure. So if you're preparing for a situation of a suffix, then it's going to be prepared for the Kai too. Chadama one says, no, Kai ain't a Tsaya. That this Kai is not like the Tsaya. Meaning if you gather the earth to cover the excrement of a child leaving themselves on the floor, you would not be able to use that to cover the blood of a Kai that Teshech Dan Yom Tov. Because as Rashi explains, Kai in regards to the Tsaya is like suffix regarding Vadai. Because as we mentioned before, and this is why it relates back to the previous discussion, the Tsaya of a tinnik, a child making, is more common. It's almost very close that it's going to happen. You know a child's going to run around, that something's going to happen. So, but the blood of the Kai is intrinsically suffix. So that is considered as a suffix, and therefore you actually would not be able to use that earth to cover the blood of the Kai. Now, it didn't say who said which opinion. It says, Gemara, it's a standard Rava Huda Amar, we could prove that it was Rava, he's the one that said that Kai Harei Kutsaya, that the Kai is like the Tsaya, meaning that that Tsaya is like a suffix, and therefore Kai would be permitted in the preparation of that earth that was for the Tsaya, because Kaya and Tsaya are both suffix. Because the Amar Rava, and this is what we quoted before, Rava had said, if you gather earth to cover the excrement, you're allowed to use it to cover the blood of the bird, which that's for sure, because the blood of the bird is Vada. But he said, Dam tzipur, if you prepared the blood of the bird, you're not used to cover the excrement. Why not? Why wasn't he like Nabloi, who said that you could cover the blood of you could use it to cover the excrement? The Rabban said you cover the excrement because it's carv levadai. So it's also like a vadai. But Rabbi said, no, you can't use it to cover the excrement. Obviously, look at the tzoy is like suffix. And if it's like suffix, then it would be mashma that kai would be kitzaya, and Rav is that man da'ama who said that you could cover the blood of the kai with it because they actually have both suffix. It's not considered carv levadai. This time, let's prove that Rav was the one who said that kai is like tzaya, and if you prepared it for the tzaya, you could use it for the kai too. Now, the Gemara continues regarding these two interpretations of the Mishnah Masechtas Chulin that we had. The Gemara brings Rami Bered Rav Yeva Amar. He says, meaning we had brought the Mishnah Masechtas Chulin, we first brought an interpretation that the reason why you cannot shacht it is because, although it's prepared, but it's prepared only for vadai, not for a suffix. He says another interpretation. He says kai. He says the reason why can't you cover the blood of the kai? Why is it different than vadai chaya, which we said, like Rabbi Yehuda had said, that if you have earth prepared, you could use it on Yom Tov, so why can't you use it for the kai? It's a different interpretation. It's gezei mishmataras chelboy. It's a rabbinic concern because you might come to permit the fats. If we let you cover the blood of the kai on Yom Tov,
so it's uso.
You're gonna which one?
So it's also to cover the blood today.
The Mishnah Masechtas Chulin says Im shafte im echasna as damai. We wanted to know why don't you cover the blood if the earth is prepared?
So you cannot cover it with sufek because if it's a sufek that this is not supposed to mechase, then you can come to mater chelboy. So then it should be usar of him to mechase zabach pasufek.
When on the weekday. Yeah, that's going to be my question. Yeah, exactly. But first, the Gemara is talking about on Yom Tov itself, that if we let you cover the blood, people are going to say, oh, why cover the blood? Piece of dam is only on the chaya. Oh, it's a chaya. Oh, chaya actually does not have the problem of chayla. It's only about behema. So you can come to commit this fence. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, I feel l'chol nami. And even during the weekday, you should say that it should be forbidden to cover it, because people are going to say it's a chaya, and then come to Mata Chelbud. So the Gemara, no, b'chayla ami, people are going to say, l'naka chatzeu tzarach. They're going to say, why is he covered? Whoever, the one who sees him covering the blood, is not going to say he needs kis adam. He wants to clean out his courtyard. He doesn't want to be dirty, so he's covering it over. But he's not going to say that because necessarily that it's a chaya. It says, wait, that's not such a great answer. Because shachet ba'ashba, if the guy's shechting in the garbage dump, Mike, remember, what are you going to say over there? When he's covering it over so it should be a clean garbage dump? And moreover, the Gemara has another question. It says that if, let's say someone has a kite, and Boli Malach, he's coming to ask the Chachamim, come to Freik the Ruv, does he have to cover, he says, this kite, wants to know, does he have to cover the blood? Now, in the weekday, they would rule for him, like you said, that to cover the blood, because maybe it's a chaya. But Mike, remember, what are you going to be able to say over there? The guy himself is going to say, I asked the Rav, and he says I should cover the blood. Obviously, it's a chaya. I know all my other animals, behind I don't have to, chayas I have to. And they told me I have to cover the blood. So, obviously, it's a chaya. He's going to come to eat the fats. But maybe it's behemah. Maybe it's forbidden. So, Elreda says the Gemara, which actually Rashi does not have the gear sale. It's not really changing anything. It's answering the question. No, it's not true. It's not difficult. But on the weekday, Inami misafka, even if it's, let's say, a situation of doubt, which it is, Amalei Rabbanan, the rabbis would tell him, Zil Tarch B'chasi, go through the effort and cover it. In other words, in the weekday, when the rabbi is telling him to go ahead and cover the blood, the guy wouldn't presume that it's definitively a chaya. He'll say, okay, even if the rabbis are not sure if it's a chaya behema, but still they're going to say, okay, go through the tircha and go ahead and cover it because it might be a chaya. So he's not going to infer that it must be that it's a chaya. But the Yom Tiv, if it's on Yom Tiv, that he's asking the Shaila, if it's really a doubt if it's Chai Behema, would the rabbis go ahead and tell him to go through the effort and cover it? But it might not be obligated. So therefore, then he's actually going to presume that it must be for sure Chaya, because else they wouldn't tell me to go do something that would be unnecessary for Yom Tiv purpose. And therefore, he's going to come to permit the Chaylev. And that's why he said, no, that's why he now cover the blood, that he should not come to shpar, to infer that it is a definitive chai, because not definitively, it might be a behemoth. Now, clear on this theme, the Gemara brings Ton Reb Zeiram, loy koil blavad amur. It's not only by the koi that we said in the Mishnah Masechet Chulin that you cannot cover its blood on Yom Tiv, where we said the halacha makes sense that you should not cover the blood, because it might be a behemoth. And you're doing a tircha that's not for a mitzvah purpose, even with ashes that are prepared in the stove before Yom Tov, it's still an unnecessary tircha. Not only by the kai itself did we say this, even if you shechted three types, three species of a domesticated animal, a wild animal, and the birds. Let's say all the bloods got mixed together, where that there is one that requires to have kisui, but there is one that doesn't require, which that is behema. Even so, you're not going to cover that blood on Yom Tov because you're doing a tircha also for the animal, and the animal, this blood, does not require kisadam. As Taisa asks, what do you mean? The chachamim, because of tircha, which is a rabbinic concern, is being oiker a biblical halacha. Kisu is derais, it's a kisu ba'afer. How could the halacha of tircha override the mitzvah kisadam? So he says yes, because we know Shebal Tasa that the chacham have the ability to say yes. We're uprooting a biblical halacha in a passive way, don't do anything. Because of tircha, you now go ahead and cover the blood. Now, however, the Gemara qualifies, no, he says, we didn't learn this halacha, only because you cannot cover it with one covering, one push of the shovel. But let's say you could take one shovelful and cover all the bloods, including the behemoth, then it would be permitted. Which the Gemara says pshita, obviously, but you didn't do an extra tircha because of the behemoth. You're not violating the rabbinic concern of tircha. Says the Gemara, yeah, but Ma'atim, what would you say? Nigza the kira achas understand the kiras. We would make a gzeira that not to do even one shovelful because you might do two shovelfuls. Mashmalan, that they're telling you that no, if you can do one shovelful, we're going to let you do that on Yom Tov. Staying on this theme, Amar Rabba, it says shachat tzibim erev Yom Tov. Let's say someone shechted a bird from before Yom Tov. So you're not allowed to cover that blood on Yom Tov because he should have covered it from before Yom Tov. And you're going to tell me it's going to hold back from simply Yom Tov. It's not true. Because if you don't cover the blood, it's not going to make it problematic of eating the bird. You're a shechted, you're allowed to eat it. So although you're allowed to cover blood on Yom Tov, but that's only if you're shechted in Yom Tov. If you're shechted from before Yom Tov, now I'll cover it. Now, however, as we continue to phase, to top of Tasim and Aleph, Gilgal Isam Erev Yom Tov. Let's say you made a dough for before Yom Tov. They're mafresh min chalas of Yom Tov. You're actually allowed to take off the challah on Yom Tov. Meaning, although a Mishnah teaches later on that there are rabbinic concerns, you're not allowed to take off Trumas and Ma'aseh Yom Tov because it's like fixing something. So here also, the challah is similar to the truma of grain, where you could have separated from before Yom Tov. Even so, the halacha Rab is telling us, or Rava, he says, is you're allowed to separate it. Why? Taisa explains in detail what Rashi is saying is that they didn't make a gzeira on the truma of dough, which is what challah is, because you let him make the dough on Yom Tov and bake it. And if you let him make dough and bake it on Yom Tov to eat warm bread, you obviously let to take a challah because you have to take a challah to go ahead and make the dough. So therefore, there they didn't make that the rabbinic concern. So even though you didn't make it on Yom Tov, you made them before Yom Tov, but they never made the isra of taking off challah on Yom Tov, so they didn't make the dough from before Yom Tov, you let to go ahead and take it on Yom Tov. What? Right. So you're asking that why wouldn't you be able to cover the blood? Yeah, but here it's intrinsic in the isser itself. There you could shech the faket. You could shech the Yom Tov. That's partially according to everyone that you could do what you could do on Yom Tov, and then you could do what you need to. But here, that you don't have to do it on Yom Tov. You can do it from before Yom Tov. Shech, you want to have fresh meat. The dough, I think I'm trying to remember that's what Sheish discusses there.
Kiss your down, you're not allowed to move the earth unless you prepare.
Right. So that's the difference he's saying regarding the dough and the blood, because the blood is not going to make it forbidden. No, the difference is by challah is that you're not going to be able to eat it without separating the challah. Here, as a Rashi seems to say, that's not going to make it. It's not going to make a problem. You could still have the simchas yom. Here, you're not going to be able to have it if you don't take off the challah. Now, however, the father Shmuel, he says, no, even if you made the dough from before Yom Tov, meaning just like the blood of the bird, you now take off the challah on Yom Tov. Because you're right, they permitted you to separate challah on Yom Tov only if the dough is made on Yom Tov. But this, you should have done from before Yom Tov, like the truma that you have from grain and produce. And if you didn't, then you cannot. So therefore, that's what the father Shmuel holds. Says the Gemara, so let's say Shmuel disagrees with his father. Because the Amar Shmuel said challah chutz la'aretz. If you have the challah from chutz la'aretz, meaning if you separate it from a dough, challah and chutz la'aretz, since it's not biblical, the Gemara Kedushin of Lam base tells us that any mitzvah that's dependent on produce that grows on land is only noig in Eretz Yisrael. So it's only rabbinic the challah chutz la'aretz. So Shmuel said, you could eat the whole bread, you could leave over a portion enough for the challah, and then after you finish eating the challah, then you could separate that as challah. So obviously, the hafrasha is unnecessary, and it's not like a hafrasha. So if someone separates the challah and Yom Tov, it's not like he's fixing anything that should be forbidden, like all other truma, which is like fixing something, which Rabbanu or Goyzer, because it's like Nirka Masak, looks like you're fixing. So seemingly, Shmuel's not like his father. His father's saying you can't do it on Yom Tov because you could have done it before Yom Tov. What's the problem? Because you're masakin. What do you mean Shmuel? It's not masakin. You don't have to take up the challah. You could have it afterwards. So let's say Shmuel's disagreeing with his father. And Rabbi says no. Shmuel agree that even though you don't have to separate the challah before, you could separate at the end. But doesn't he agree Shem Karla Hashem that if you did go ahead and designate it as a Shem of challah, Shasul Azam, of course that's going to be forbidden for Zarm. Obviously, it does have the significance of the Shem of Truma being taking effect in it, and it's included in the halachic Isra of Emak being Trumas and Maises B'Yamtim. So those Shmuel says you don't have to, but if you do, then it is going to be like challah and being mafesh and being masakin. And therefore, it could be like he's his father. He wouldn't disagree with his father that you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Yeah, you don't have to, like Chalas Chutzah, you can wait till the end. But if you do, you know that it's going to be us like his father. That's the machlekes. If you're saying that this hafresh of challah, is it the same thing like the bird, where you didn't do it before Yom Tov, you can't do it? Or do we say no, that we never made that as problematic because you're allowed to make the dough on Yom Tov, and it's going to hold back the simchas Yom Tov, then you're allowed to go ahead and do the hafresh on Yom Tov. Thank you to anytime.